The wealthy businessman kicked the homeless man off the street and called the police. "You're nothing," he said. 5 years later, he went bankrupt and ended up on the street himself. One day, that homeless man appeared before him and gave him something that changed his life forever. This is the story of pride and forgiveness.
Richard Sterling was a successful businessman who owned a chain of luxury hotels in the city. At 42 years old, he had everything society considers valuable: wealth, status, a penthouse apartment, expensive cars, designer suits, and the respect that money commands. Richard believed he had earned every bit of his success through his own intelligence and hard work. He looked down on people who were poor or struggling, viewing them as lazy or foolish. In his mind, success was simply a matter of making smart choices, and poverty was the result of bad decisions. His luxury hotel, the Sterling Grand, stood in the heart of the downtown business district. It was a symbol of Richard's success: gleaming marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and prices that only the wealthy could afford. Every morning, Richard would arrive at his hotel in his black Mercedes, dressed in his $1,000 suit, ready to inspect his property and ensure everything met his exacting standards. He was known as a demanding boss who showed no mercy to employees who made mistakes. "Excellence is not negotiable," he would say. "If you cannot meet my standards, there are 1,000 people who can replace you." One cold November morning, Richard arrived at his hotel to find a homeless man sitting on the sidewalk near the entrance. The man was maybe 50 years old, with a gray beard, worn clothes, and a tattered blanket wrapped around his shoulders. He held a small cardboard sign that read, "Homeless Veteran. Anything helps. God bless." Richard's face twisted with disgust. This homeless man was sitting right in front of his luxury hotel, where wealthy guests arrived and departed. It was bad for business. It made his hotel look less prestigious. Richard approached the homeless man with anger in his eyes. "You need to leave. Now. You are sitting in front of my hotel and driving away my customers. Go find somewhere else to beg." The homeless man looked up at Richard with calm, tired eyes. "Sir, I am not bothering anyone. I am just sitting here. This is a public sidewalk." "I do not care if it is a public sidewalk," Richard snapped. "You are bad for my business. You are making my hotel look cheap. I want you gone, or I will call the police." The homeless man remained calm. "Sir, I am a veteran. I served this country for 20 years. I am just trying to survive. I am not hurting anyone." Richard laughed coldly. "A veteran? If you were a real veteran, you would have a job and a home. You are probably just another lazy bum who wants handouts instead of working. I do not believe your sob story. Now get out of here before I have you arrested for loitering." The homeless man studied Richard's face for a long moment. Despite the cruel words, his expression showed no anger, only sadness and something that looked like pity. "I will move to another spot," the man said quietly. "But sir, I want to tell you something. Life can change very quickly. The man who looks down from the top of the mountain can find himself at the bottom before he knows what happened. I hope you never learn that lesson the hard way." Richard scoffed. "Are you threatening me? I am a successful businessman. I am nothing like you. I will never be like you because I am smart and I work hard. Now get out of my sight." The homeless man gathered his blanket and his sign and walked slowly down the street, limping slightly. As he left, he looked back at Richard one more time with those same sad, pitying eyes. Richard dismissed the encounter immediately and went into his hotel, already forgetting about the homeless man. He had more important things to think about: business deals, profit margins, expansion plans. He had no time to waste thinking about people who had failed at life. 6 months after Richard kicked the homeless veteran away from his hotel, his life was still perfect. His business was thriving, his bank accounts were full, and his reputation in the business community was strong. He had completely forgotten about the homeless man and the warning he had given. But then, things began to change. It started small, a few business deals that fell through unexpectedly. A major investor backed out of a hotel expansion project at the last minute. An important contract was awarded to a competitor instead of Richard's company. Richard was not worried at first. Business had ups and downs. He was confident he could recover from these minor setbacks. Then larger problems emerged. A major scandal broke out when it was revealed that Richard's business partner had been embezzling money from their company for years. Richard had not known about the embezzling, but as the co-owner, he was legally liable for the missing funds. Suddenly, Richard faced lawsuits, investigations, and massive financial penalties. The news media covered the scandal extensively. Richard's reputation, which he had spent 20 years building, was destroyed in a matter of weeks. Business associates who had once courted his favor now refused to return his calls. Investors withdrew their money. Customers canceled their hotel reservations. Richard tried desperately to save his business. He sold his expensive cars, his vacation properties, his art collection, anything he could liquidate to pay the legal fees and penalties. But it was not enough. The debt was too large, the legal problems too complex. Within a year of the embezzlement scandal breaking, Richard lost everything. His hotels were foreclosed and sold to pay creditors. His penthouse apartment was seized. His bank accounts were frozen and drained to pay legal judgments. At 43 years old, Richard Sterling, who had once been a millionaire businessman, was bankrupt, homeless, and unemployed. The fall from the top to the bottom had happened so quickly that Richard could barely process it. 1 year ago, he had been kicking a homeless man away from his hotel entrance. Now he was the homeless man. Richard tried to find work, but his scandal-tainted reputation made him unemployable in the business world. Companies that might have hired him feared the negative publicity. His former friends and associates avoided him, not wanting to be associated with his failure. With no money, no job, and no prospects, Richard ended up on the streets. He slept in shelters when he could get a bed, and on park benches when he could not. He ate at soup kitchens and food banks. He wore donated clothes that did not fit properly. He learned what it felt like to be invisible, to have people look through him as if he did not exist, to be dismissed as worthless, to be treated like trash. The irony was not lost on Richard. He remembered the homeless veteran he had mocked and kicked away. He remembered telling the man that he was lazy, that his poverty was his own fault, that Richard would never be like him because he was smart and hardworking. Now Richard understood how wrong he had been. Homelessness was not always the result of laziness or bad choices. Sometimes it was the result of circumstances beyond one's control, betrayal, bad luck, the collapse of everything you had built. Richard had worked hard his entire life, made what he thought were smart decisions, and still ended up on the streets. Richard's first months on the streets taught him brutal lessons about poverty, invisibility, and the cruelty of strangers. He learned what it meant to be treated as less than human. People walked past him as if he were a piece of garbage on the sidewalk. Businessmen in expensive suits, men who looked exactly like Richard had looked a year ago, would avert their eyes when passing him, as if looking at a homeless person might somehow contaminate them. Sometimes people were openly cruel. Teenagers would mock him. Once, a group of young men threw coins at him, laughing as he scrambled to pick them up because he desperately needed the money. Shop owners would shoo him away from their storefronts. Security guards would force him to move along whenever he tried to rest somewhere. Richard experienced the daily humiliations of homelessness, being denied entry to public restrooms, being kicked out of libraries and coffee shops, being told he was making other customers uncomfortable with his presence. He learned that poverty made you invisible except when people wanted to feel superior by treating you badly. The hardest part was not the physical discomfort of sleeping rough or the constant hunger. The hardest part was the psychological weight of feeling worthless, of being treated like you did not matter, of losing all dignity and hope. Richard thought about the homeless veteran he had kicked away from his hotel. He replayed the conversation in his mind constantly, cringing at his own cruelty. "You are probably just another lazy bum who wants handouts instead of working," he had said. "I will never be like you because I am smart and I work hard." Now Richard understood how wrong he had been. The veteran had probably experienced his own fall from grace. He had served his country for 20 years and ended up on the streets, not because he was lazy or made bad choices, but because life had dealt him circumstances he could not overcome. Richard wished desperately that he could find that veteran and apologize. He wanted to tell the man he had been wrong, that he understood now, that he was sorry for his cruelty. But the city was large, and Richard had no idea where the veteran might be. For all Richard knew, the man might have died on the streets, a fate Richard himself now feared. One cold night, Richard stood on the corner near where his luxury hotel used to be. The hotel was now owned by a competitor. A new name was on the building, but the structure was the same. Richard stared at the entrance where he had once kicked away the homeless veteran. "I am sorry," Richard whispered to the memory of that man. "I am so sorry for how I treated you. I understand now. I was arrogant and cruel. I judged you without knowing your story. I thought I was better than you, but I was just luckier." And luck ran out. Richard felt tears freeze on his cheeks in the winter air. He was not crying just for himself. He was crying for every person he had ever looked down on, every employee he had fired without mercy, every struggling person he had dismissed as lazy or worthless. On a particularly cold January evening, Richard heard about a soup kitchen run by a local church that served free meals to homeless people. He was desperately hungry, he had not eaten in 2 days, so he swallowed his pride and joined the line outside the church. About 50 homeless people stood in line, waiting for the doors to open. Richard recognized some faces he had seen on the streets, other people surviving day by day, just like him. Some were veterans. Some were mentally ill. Some were people who had lost jobs and homes. All were struggling. When the doors opened, Richard shuffled inside with the others. The church basement had been converted into a dining hall with long tables and folding chairs. The walls were decorated with religious messages about love, compassion, and caring for the poor. Volunteers served hot soup, bread, and coffee. Richard sat at a table with other homeless men and women, eating gratefully. The food was simple but warm and filling, luxuries Richard no longer took for granted. As Richard ate, an elderly volunteer approached his table, offering more bread. The volunteer was a woman in her 70s with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Would you like more bread, sir?" she asked. Richard looked up, struck by the fact that she had called him, sir, a title of respect he had not heard in months. "Yes, please," he said quietly. "Thank you." The woman placed more bread on his plate. "God bless you," she said warmly. "I hope things get better for you soon." Richard felt tears prick his eyes at this simple kindness. When was the last time someone had looked at him with compassion instead of contempt? After the meal, Richard helped the volunteers clean up. It was expected that those who ate would help with dishes and tables. As he washed dishes in the kitchen, he noticed something posted on the wall, a list of volunteers who regularly served at the soup kitchen. One name caught his eye, James Wilson, veteran volunteer, every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Richard's heart skipped. Could this be the same veteran he had kicked away from his hotel? Wilson was a common name, and there were many veterans in the city. But something told Richard he needed to find out. He asked one of the volunteers, "James Wilson, is he here tonight?" The volunteer smiled. "Oh, James. Yes, he is here. He never misses a Tuesday or Thursday. He is upstairs in the chapel, I think, setting up for the evening service. Would you like me to take you to him?" Richard's hands were shaking as he followed the volunteer upstairs. Part of him wanted to run away. What would he say to this man if it was the same veteran he had treated so cruelly? How could he face him? But Richard needed to know. He needed to apologize if this was the same man. The volunteer led Richard to the chapel, where a man was arranging chairs. When the man turned around, Richard's breath caught in his throat. It was him. The same homeless veteran Richard had kicked away from his hotel 15 months ago. The same gray beard, though neater now. The same tired but kind eyes. The man was wearing clean clothes, not expensive, but clean and mended. He looked healthier than he had on the street. The veteran, James Wilson, looked at Richard and recognition slowly dawned in his eyes. "I remember you," James said quietly. "You are the businessman from the Sterling Hotel. The one who called the police on me." Richard felt his face burn with shame. "Yes," he whispered. "That was me. I am sorry. I am so sorry for how I treated you." James Wilson studied Richard for a long moment. Richard expected anger, resentment, perhaps even satisfaction at seeing the arrogant businessman brought low. But James's expression showed none of these things. Instead, he showed the same calm compassion he had shown 15 months ago when Richard had treated him so cruelly. "Sit down," James said gently, gesturing to one of the chapel chairs. "You look exhausted." Richard sat, barely able to meet James's eyes. "I do not deserve your kindness," Richard said, his voice breaking. "I treated you terribly. I called you lazy. I said you were worthless. I had you kicked away from my hotel like you were garbage. And now I am exactly where you were. I am homeless. I am the man people kick away from storefronts. I understand now what I did to you, and I am so sorry." James sat down beside Richard. "I forgave you that day," James said simply. "I knew you were speaking from ignorance, not from evil. You did not understand what homelessness really meant. You thought it was a moral failing instead of a circumstance. But I was cruel to you," Richard protested. "I do not deserve your forgiveness." "Forgiveness is not about deserving," James replied. "It is about choosing not to carry hate in your heart. I learned that lesson a long time ago, when I came back from work carrying anger and pain. That anger almost destroyed me. Forgiveness saved me." Richard looked at James with confusion. "How did you end up homeless? You said you were a veteran. What happened?" James settled back in his chair, his eyes distant with memory. "I served in the military for 20 years. When I came back from my final deployment, I had severe PTSD, flashbacks, nightmares, panic attacks. I tried to work, but I could not hold down a job. My marriage fell apart. I started drinking to numb the pain. Eventually, I lost my apartment and ended up on the streets." "But you are not on the streets now," Richard observed. "What changed?" "This church changed everything," James said, gesturing around the chapel. "A pastor found me sleeping in an alley and brought me here. He did not lecture me or judge me. He just said, 'You are welcome here. Let us help you.' The church connected me with VA services for my PTSD. They helped me find subsidized housing. They gave me purpose by letting me volunteer. Slowly, I put my life back together, not all the way back to what it was, but enough to have dignity and hope again." James looked directly at Richard. The difference between having a home and being homeless is often just one person who cares enough to help. One person who sees you as human instead of as a problem. You needed someone to see you that way, and I am guessing no one has, until you came here tonight. Richard felt tears streaming down his face. "I had so much," he said. "Money, success, power. And I wasted it all on my ego. I looked down on people like you. I thought I was better. I thought poverty was a choice. I was so wrong about everything." "You were not wrong about everything," James said kindly. "You were wrong about the nature of poverty and the value of human beings. But you were right that hard work matters, that making good choices matters. You just did not understand that sometimes hard work and good choices are not enough. Sometimes life deals you cards you cannot beat alone. That is when you need compassion from others." James stood up and extended his hand to Richard. "Come with me. let me show you something. James led Richard through the church to a small office. The door had a simple sign, Community Outreach Program, Director, James Wilson. You are the director? Richard asked, surprised. Yes, James said. After the church helped me get back on my feet, I wanted to give back. I started volunteering, and eventually the pastor asked me to run the outreach program. We do more than just serve meals. We help homeless people access services, find housing, get job training, reconnect with family. We try to give people what was given to me, a chance to rebuild. James opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. I have something to show you. Do you remember the day you kicked me away from your hotel? Richard nodded, shame flooding his face again. That day, James continued, I was not there randomly. I was there specifically to observe your hotel. Richard looked confused. Why? James smiled slightly. Before I ended up on the streets, I worked in real estate development. Even during my homeless years, I kept learning about the market, reading discarded newspapers, following business news from library computers. When your hotel went into foreclosure, I knew it was an excellent property that would sell below market value due to the scandal associated with it. Richard's eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. I had been saving money from various odd jobs and a small pension, James continued. It was not much, but the church helped me access a special loan program for veterans starting businesses. I approached several investors, people who knew me from before my homelessness and who trusted me. Together, we raised enough capital to buy your hotel when it went to auction. Richard stared at James in disbelief. You bought my hotel? Yes, James said. The Sterling Grand is now called the Wilson Community Hotel. We still operate it as a luxury hotel, same high standards, same excellent service. But we also reserve 30% of our rooms for transitional housing for homeless people working their way back to stability. We employ formerly homeless people, train them in hospitality, and help them build careers. The profits from the luxury side fund the community side. Richard was speechless. The homeless man he had kicked away from his hotel now owned that hotel and was using it to help other homeless people. Why did you not tell me before? Richard asked. Because I wanted you to understand what it feels like to be homeless first, James said gently but firmly. If I had revealed this to you immediately, you would have been humbled by my success, but you would not have truly learned the lesson. You needed to experience the streets, the hunger, the cruelty, the invisibility. You needed to learn what I learned, that homeless people are not lazy or worthless. They are human beings facing circumstances they cannot overcome alone. They deserve compassion, not contempt. James pulled out a manila envelope from the folder. I have been watching you for the past 2 months since you showed up at the soup kitchen. I have seen how you interact with other homeless people, with respect and kindness. I have seen you help others even though you have nothing to give. I have seen you learn humility and compassion. That is why I am going to offer you something now. James handed Richard the manila envelope. Open it, he said. With shaking hands, Richard opened the envelope and pulled out several documents. The first was a job offer letter. Position, Assistant Director of Community Outreach. Salary, $45,000 per year. Housing, provided in Transitional Housing Program. Richard looked up at James with tears in his eyes. You are offering me a job? After everything I did to you? I am offering you a chance to rebuild your life, James corrected. The same chance that was offered to me. But this offer comes with conditions. Anything, Richard said. I will do anything. First, James said, you will live in our transitional housing for 6 months alongside other formerly homeless people. You will experience the program from the inside. You will understand what it is like to rebuild with limited resources and constant reminders of your past. Second, you will work directly with homeless individuals, helping them access services, apply for housing, navigate bureaucracy. You will treat every person with dignity and respect, remembering that you were recently in their position. Third, you will share your story publicly. You will speak at events, appear in our promotional materials, and admit to donors and supporters that you went from being a wealthy businessman who looked down on the homeless to becoming homeless yourself. You will use your story to challenge stereotypes and build empathy. Fourth, and most importantly, you will commit to this work not as a temporary stopping point on your way back to wealth, but as a genuine calling. We are not offering you a stepping stone back to your old life. We are offering you a different life, one with less money but more meaning. James looked Richard directly in the eyes. Can you accept these conditions? Can you commit to serving the community you once despised? Richard did not hesitate. Yes. Absolutely yes. James, you have given me something I do not deserve, mercy, forgiveness, and a second chance. I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. You cannot earn grace, James said with a slight smile. That is the point. It is given freely. All you can do is pay it forward to others. Richard wiped his eyes. Why are you doing this for me? I was so cruel to you. James was quiet for a moment before answering. When I was at my lowest point, living on the streets, drowning in PTSD and addiction, a pastor showed me undeserved kindness. He had every reason to walk past me, to dismiss me as hopeless. But he stopped, saw me as human, and offered help. His kindness saved my life. That pastor told me something I have never forgotten. James, you did not deserve the circumstances that broke you, and you do not deserve the grace that will save you. Grace is not about deserving. It is about seeing the divine image in every human being, no matter how broken they appear. James put his hand on Richard's shoulder. You broke because of circumstances partly beyond your control. Yes, you made mistakes, but the punishment far exceeded the crime. Now you are being given grace not because you deserve it, but because every human being deserves a chance to rebuild, to learn, to become better. That includes you. Richard moved into the transitional housing program at the Wilson Community Hotel. His apartment was a small room, clean, safe, and basic, but nothing like the luxury penthouse he had once owned. He shared common areas with 15 other people in the program, all of them rebuilding their lives after homelessness. The other residents were initially suspicious of Richard. Word had spread that he was the former owner of the hotel who had lost everything. Some resented him, assuming he would be arrogant or would receive special treatment. But Richard proved them wrong through his actions. He attended every life skills workshop, every job training session, every support group meeting. He cleaned common areas without being asked. He helped other residents practice for job interviews. He listened to their stories without judgment. One resident, a woman named Maria who had been homeless for 3 years after escaping domestic violence, initially refused to speak to Richard. You are only here because James took pity on you, she told him coldly. You do not really understand what we have been through. Richard did not argue with her. Instead, he simply said, you are right. I will never fully understand what you have been through. But I have learned that I was wrong about homeless people. I used to think homelessness was a choice or a moral failing. Living on the streets taught me that it is usually the result of circumstances beyond people's control. I am here to learn and to help however I can. Slowly, Maria and the other residents began to accept Richard. They saw that he was genuinely humble, genuinely changed. He did not try to position himself above them or act like his homelessness had been different or worse than theirs. Richard discovered that he was good at this work. His business skills, organization, problem-solving, communication, translated well to social work. But more importantly, his lived experience gave him credibility and empathy that no amount of training could provide. When he sat across from a newly homeless person who was ashamed and terrified, Richard could say, I was homeless too. 6 months ago, I was sleeping in shelters and eating at soup kitchens. I understand how you feel. And I am here to tell you that you can rebuild. It is possible. Let me help you. As part of his commitment to share his story publicly, Richard began speaking at fundraising events for the Wilson Community Hotel's outreach program. Standing before wealthy donors, people who looked exactly like he had looked 2 years ago, Richard would tell his story. 2 years ago, I was a millionaire businessman, he would say. I looked down on homeless people. I thought they were lazy and worthless. Then I lost everything and ended up on the streets myself. I learned that homelessness can happen to anyone. It happened to me. And the man I had treated most cruelly, a homeless veteran I kicked away from my hotel, became the man who saved me with undeserved grace and a second chance. These speeches were humbling. Richard had to publicly acknowledge his former arrogance and cruelty. But they were also powerful. Donors connected with his authentic transformation. Donations to the program increased significantly. More importantly, Richard's story changed minds. Wealthy businessmen who had viewed homeless people with contempt began to see them as fellow human beings who had faced hard circumstances. Richard became living proof that, there but for the grace of God go I. 1 year after Richard started working at the Wilson Community Hotel, James called him into his office. Richard, I need to talk to you about something important. Richard sat down, wondering what James wanted to discuss. You have done excellent work this past year, James said. You have helped dozens of people transition off the streets. You have been humble and dedicated. You have genuinely transformed. I am proud of you. Thank you, Richard said. This work has given me purpose I never had before. When I was chasing money and status, I felt empty. Now, helping people rebuild their lives, I feel fulfilled in a way I never did before. James nodded. I am glad to hear that. Because I have an opportunity to present to you, and I want you to think carefully before answering. He handed Richard a business card. It belonged to a wealthy real estate developer. This man contacted me last week. He has been following your story. He is impressed by your transformation and your work here. He wants to offer you a position as vice president of his real estate development company. The salary would be $250,000 per year. You would have an expense account, a luxury apartment, and all the trappings of your old life. Richard stared at the business card, his heart pounding. This was his chance to return to wealth and status. Everything he had lost could be regained. Why are you telling me this? Richard asked quietly. Because I want you to have a choice, James said. I want you to choose this life of service freely, not because you have no other options. If you want to return to the business world, I understand. You have learned valuable lessons. You would be a better businessman now than you were before. I would not judge you for taking this opportunity. Richard was quiet for a long moment, looking at the business card. 2 years ago, he would have accepted this offer immediately without hesitation. But 2 years ago, he had been a different person. Can I be honest with you? Richard asked. Of course. Part of me wants to take this job, Richard admitted. Part of me misses having money, having status, being able to afford nice things. I am not going to pretend that living in transitional housing and earning $45,000 a year is easy after being a millionaire. That is honest, James said. Go on. But a bigger part of me knows that going back to that life would be a mistake, Richard continued. When I had wealth and status, I was empty and cruel. I looked down on people. I measured worth by bank accounts. I was successful by society's standards but bankrupt in my soul. Now I have very little money. I live in a small room. I cannot afford fancy restaurants or luxury vacations. But I have something I never had before, purpose, meaning, connection to other people. The residents in our program are not just clients to me, they are friends, fellow survivors. Helping someone transition from homelessness to stability gives me more satisfaction than closing any business deal ever did. Richard looked James in the eyes. I do not want to go back to my old life. I want to stay here and continue this work. Not because I have no other choice, but because this is where I choose to be. James smiled, a genuine, warm smile. I was hoping you would say that. That offer was real, by the way. I did not fabricate it to test you. You truly could return to wealth if you wanted. The fact that you are choosing to stay tells me your transformation is complete and genuine. James stood and extended his hand. Welcome home, Richard. You are exactly where you belong. 5 years after Richard began working at the Wilson Community Hotel, the program had grown significantly. They now operated 3 hotels in different cities, all following the same model: luxury accommodations funding transitional housing and job training for formerly homeless individuals. Richard had been promoted to director of programs, overseeing all 3 locations. He trained new staff, developed curricula, and continued to speak publicly about his journey from millionaire to homeless to servant leader. But the most meaningful moment came when the board of directors asked Richard to establish a new program, the Second Chance Business Incubator. This program would help formerly homeless individuals start their own small businesses, providing microloans, mentorship, and business training. You have unique qualifications for this, James told Richard. You understand business, but you also understand what it means to start from nothing. You can teach formerly homeless entrepreneurs not just how to make money, but how to build businesses with integrity and compassion. Richard threw himself into the new program. He helped a formerly homeless veteran start a landscaping business. He helped a woman who had escaped domestic violence open a catering company. He helped a young man who had aged out of foster care launch a computer repair service. Each business was small, but each represented someone rebuilding their life through entrepreneurship. And Richard taught each entrepreneur the same lesson James had taught him: success is not measured by how much money you make, but by how many people you help along the way. One day, Richard received an unexpected visitor at his office. It was a businessman named David Chen, someone Richard recognized from his old life. They had once been competitors in the luxury hotel business. Richard Sterling, David said, looking at Richard with a mix of curiosity and awkwardness. I heard you were working here. I had to come see for myself. Is it true? You went from owning hotels to working for a nonprofit? It is true, Richard said. Please, sit down. David sat, shaking his head in apparent disbelief. I do not understand. You could have rebuilt your business empire. People would have invested in you again after enough time passed. Instead, you chose this. He gestured around the modest office. I chose this, Richard confirmed. Would you like to know why? David nodded. When I owned luxury hotels, I measured success by profits and market share, Richard explained. I looked down on people who were not as successful as me. I thought wealth made me superior. Then I lost everything and became homeless. I experienced being treated as worthless, as invisible, as less than human. A man I had treated cruelly, a homeless veteran I kicked away from my hotel, showed me grace I did not deserve. He gave me a second chance. He taught me that human worth is not measured by bank accounts. He showed me that real success is about how you treat people, especially people who have nothing to offer you in return. Richard leaned forward. David, when I owned hotels, I was rich but empty. Now I earn a modest salary and live simply, but I am fulfilled in a way I never was before. I help people rebuild their lives. I see the divine worth in every human being. I have found my true calling. This is success, even if it does not look like what society calls success. David was quiet for a long moment. I think, he said slowly, I came here expecting to feel superior to you, to see you as a cautionary tale about falling from grace. But listening to you, I think you might have found something I am still looking for, actual meaning and purpose. It is never too late, Richard said gently. You do not have to lose everything like I did to learn these lessons. You can choose compassion and service right now. After David left, Richard stood at his office window looking out at the Wilson Community Hotel. He saw residents coming and going, people in various stages of rebuilding their lives. He saw Maria, who who was now employed full-time as a front desk manager. He saw the young veteran who now ran a successful landscaping business. He saw dozens of people whose lives had been changed by second chances. James appeared beside him. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I am thinking about grace," Richard said. 5 years ago, you had every reason to hate me, to let me suffer on the streets, to let me experience the consequences of my cruelty. Instead, you showed me mercy. You gave me a second chance. You saved my life. And now you are paying it forward," James said. "That is how grace works. It multiplies. You received it, and now you give it to others, and they will give it to others. That is the legacy we are building here, not just housing and jobs, but a movement of grace." Richard smiled. "The homeless angel," he said. "That is what I call you in my mind. You appeared to me as a homeless man, and you turned out to be the angel who saved me." James laughed. "I am no angel. I am just a broken man who was shown grace and learned to pass it on. Just like you." As the sun set over the city, Richard felt a peace he had never known in his years of wealth and status. He had lost everything and gained something far more valuable: compassion, purpose, and the joy of helping others find their way home. The arrogant businessman had become a servant leader. The homeless angel had multiplied into many angels serving the forgotten. And grace continued to flow, transforming lives one second chance at a time. The story of Richard Sterling and James Wilson teaches us profound truths about pride, fall, grace, and redemption that challenge how we view success, poverty, and human worth. First, it teaches us about the danger of pride and the illusion of self-sufficiency. Richard believed his success was entirely his own achievement and that poor people deserved their poverty. His arrogance blinded him to the role of luck, privilege, and circumstances beyond individual control. This story reminds us that pride comes before a fall. Those who look down on others from positions of advantage may find themselves in those same positions faster than they ever imagined. Second, it teaches us that poverty is not a moral failing. Richard learned through painful experience that homelessness can happen to anyone regardless of intelligence, work ethic, or character. Circumstances beyond our control, betrayal, illness, economic collapse, trauma, can take away everything we have built. This story challenges the cruel myth that poor people are lazy or deserve their suffering. Third, it teaches us about the transformative power of walking in another person's shoes. Richard could not truly understand homelessness until he experienced it himself. His time on the streets gave him empathy that no amount of education or explanation could have provided. This reminds us that sometimes we must experience vulnerability ourselves before we can truly have compassion for others' vulnerability. Fourth, it teaches us that grace and forgiveness are not about deserving. James had every right to hate Richard, to let him suffer, to refuse to help. Instead, James showed mercy because grace is not about what people deserve, it is about recognizing the human dignity in every person regardless of their past actions. This story reminds us that holding on to hatred hurts us more than those we hate, and that extending grace to the undeserving is the truest form of love. Fifth, it teaches us that true success is measured by service, not wealth. Richard had more money as a millionaire businessman than he does now, but he is more fulfilled, more purposeful, and more genuinely successful in his current work helping others. This story challenges our cultural obsession with wealth and status, reminding us that meaning comes from contribution, not accumulation. Sixth, it teaches us about the importance of second chances. Both James and Richard needed second chances to rebuild their lives. James received grace from a compassionate pastor, and he extended that same grace to Richard. This creates a multiplication effect where grace flows forward, transforming not just individuals but communities. This story reminds us that we all benefit when we create systems that offer redemption rather than just punishment. Seventh, it teaches us that authentic transformation is possible but requires humility. Richard's change was not instant or easy. He had to experience suffering, acknowledge his wrongs, accept help from someone he had wronged, and commit to a completely different way of living. His transformation was authentic because it was costly. This reminds us that real change requires us to die to our old selves and be reborn with new values and priorities. Finally, it teaches us that every person we encounter has inherent worth regardless of their circumstances. The homeless veteran Richard dismissed turned out to be a capable, compassionate leader. The arrogant businessman Richard had been turned out to be capable of profound change and service. This story reminds us never to judge people's ultimate worth by their current circumstances, whether high or low. In our modern world that worships wealth and despises poverty, that values success over character, that treats homeless people as problems rather than people, this story offers a radically different vision. It suggests that those who appear to have nothing might have the most to teach us. It proposes that falling from grace might be necessary to find true grace. It insists that every human being deserves dignity, compassion, and a second chance. The question this story asks us is uncomfortable but necessary: how do we treat people who have less than us? Do we view them with contempt or compassion? Do we see them as lazy or as facing circumstances we cannot fully understand? Do we withhold grace because they have not earned it, or do we extend grace precisely because grace is not about earning? More personally, if you lost everything tomorrow, your home, your money, your status, how would you want to be treated? With the cruelty Richard showed James, or with the grace James showed Richard? And perhaps most challengingly, are we living for wealth and status like Richard once did, or are we living for service and meaning like Richard does now? What would we choose if we had to choose between them? The homeless angel saved the arrogant businessman not just with a job offer, but with the lesson that human worth transcends circumstances, that grace is more powerful than judgment, and that true success is measured by how many people we lift up, not by how high we climb above them. That is a lesson worth more than any fortune. That is a transformation worth pursuing. That is the kind of success that lasts beyond this life.